You've read the books, practiced the affirmations, meditated at dawn, yet something still feels unchanged, as if life keeps circling back to the same place. You try harder, think deeper, push for clarity, but the quiet transformation never arrives. What if the problem isn't that you're missing a technique, but that you're overlooking the one power that doesn't need technique at all? The power that doesn't come from doing, but from seeing. Pause for a second. Feel your breath. Notice the space between thoughts. That presence, simple, unforced, is the power you've been ignoring, the one that quietly changes everything when the mind finally stops trying to. The mind is a master of disguise. It wears the face of reason, control, and progress, whispering that without its constant interference everything would fall apart. It believes it is the captain steering the ship of your life, yet it never notices that it's the one creating the storms it's trying to navigate. That's the invisible deception. The mind believes it's protecting you, when in truth it's the very mechanism that keeps you confined. Imagine waking up every morning and feeling a faint sense of tension before your feet even touch the ground. The mind immediately begins constructing the day. What needs to be fixed? What might go wrong? What if I fail again? It calls this being prepared, but it's actually fear dressed as logic. The mind assumes control by predicting, analyzing, and correcting, but in doing so it hijacks your direct experience of the moment. This constant mental management creates the illusion of safety, but it's a cage lined with good intentions. Each thought becomes a guard at the door, watching for threats that may never arrive. And here's the paradox. The more the mind tries to manage life, the less alive you feel. You stop sensing the world directly and start living in interpretations of it. If you pay attention, you'll notice how the mind reacts even to silence. Sit quietly for 30 seconds and it rushes in with commentary. Am I doing this right? Should I feel something? It cannot simply be, because being threatens its existence. The mind's identity depends on constant activity. It feeds on thought the way a fire feeds on oxygen. If thought stops, the mind fears it will vanish. That's why it keeps moving, judging, labeling, comparing. It names everything it sees, and in naming it divides the seamless unity of life into categories of good and bad, safe and unsafe. Yet the world itself remains whole. Only the mind breaks it apart, then struggles to make sense of the pieces. Think of how often this pattern appears in ordinary life. You have a disagreement with someone, and long after the conversation ends, the mind replays it like a broken record. I should have said this. They were wrong. Why do I always let that happen? It reopens the wound again and again, convinced that constant analysis will bring closure. But it never does. The mind creates the hurt and then pretends to be the healer. The deeper deception is that it mistakes activity for intelligence. But true intelligence doesn't come from frantic analysis. It comes from awareness. Awareness doesn't rush. It sees. It doesn't grasp. It understands. The mind, however, cannot grasp awareness because awareness is what sees the mind. It's like a flashlight trying to illuminate itself. The source of light can't be captured by the beam it casts. Every attempt the mind makes to improve you is, in subtle ways, an act of self-preservation. It says, let me fix you, but what it's really saying is, let me keep existing as the one who fixes. It survives through your identification with its voice. If you stop believing in that voice, it loses its power. And that's what it fears most. Try this for a brief moment. Notice the next thought that arises. Don't analyze it. Don't resist it. Just see it appear, stay for a second, and fade. If you observe closely, you'll realize something profound. You are not the thought. You are the space in which the thought happens. That space has always been there, untouched by any story your mind has ever told. This realization begins to expose the trick. The mind has been pretending to be the observer all along, but the true observer doesn't speak. It doesn't need to defend, justify, or prove. It simply witnesses. And when witnessing becomes pure, without the interference of judgment or control, the mind's illusion starts to lose its hold. But don't fight the mind. Fighting it only strengthens its game, because opposition is one of its favorite forms of activity. Instead, see it. See the pattern of reaction that arises when you feel challenged, the stories that begin when you feel doubt, the inner monologue that runs when you're alone. Each time you notice it without getting pulled in, something quiet and powerful awakens beneath the noise. That quiet presence is not another thought. It's the awareness that has been here all along, silently watching. The mind, with all its cleverness, has overlooked the one force that cannot be controlled, the consciousness that observes it. And this is where the hidden doorway begins to open, when you start to sense that what you've been calling you might not be the thinker at all. The observer behind the thoughts, silent, spacious, and unchanging, is where the real power begins to stir. The deception starts to unravel the moment you recognize it, not as an enemy to destroy, but as a process to be seen. That seeing itself is already transformation in motion. Because once the mind's endless effort to control is seen for what it is, a reflex of survival, not truth, attention naturally begins to shift. It turns away from the noise and towards something quieter, deeper, and infinitely more real. And as that shift occurs, a subtle realization begins to dawn. Maybe the power you've been searching for isn't something to gain or master. Maybe it's what's been silently waiting beneath the noise of thought, ready to be noticed the moment you stop trying to control it. Most people search for power in the same place they lose it, in the mind's movement. We look for control, certainty, mastery, and call it growth. We chase new teachings, new techniques, new frameworks, and mistake accumulation for awakening. Yet the true power, the one that silently rearranges reality, has never been in movement at all. It's in the stillness that sees movement. We are conditioned to believe that power equals action. From childhood, we learn that to change our world, we must do something about it. We must think, plan, strive, and improve. But every effort to manipulate reality through thought subtly confirms that we are separate from it. That we as thinkers stand apart from life, trying to make it bend to our will. This is the core illusion. The very attempt to control keeps the controller in place. Imagine a lake during a storm. The surface is wild, restless, reflecting nothing but its own disturbance. That's the ordinary state of the human mind. Constant motion, constant commentary. And yet, deep beneath the turbulence, the water remains untouched. It holds stillness that the storm cannot reach. That depth is consciousness itself. The real power doesn't belong to the storm of thoughts, but to the depth that simply is. You may have noticed how you feel after trying to fix a problem through thinking. Perhaps you replayed a conversation, reanalyzed a mistake, or strategized your next step for hours. The more you thought, the more entangled you became. And then, maybe one evening, as you were washing dishes or walking outside, something inside just stopped. For a brief second, you weren't fixing or figuring anything out. You were simply there. And strangely, the tension softened. That moment of effortless clarity wasn't caused by thought. It was revealed when thought paused. The real power works in the same way light works in a dark room, not by fighting the darkness, but by making it irrelevant. Awareness doesn't need to struggle with what it sees. Its very presence begins to dissolve confusion, but the mind can't comprehend that because it believes in effort as the only path. It keeps saying, "I must do something," and in that very impulse, it blinds itself to the power already at rest beneath its noise. If you look closely, you'll see that all thought has one hidden assumption, that what is, isn't enough. Every plan, every worry, every expectation begins with the subtle message, "This moment is incomplete." But observation, pure, silent observation, does not agree. Observation sees completeness, even in imperfection. It sees that the flower doesn't need to understand blooming, nor the sun to decide rising. When the observer awakens in you, doing loses its frantic edge. You start to act from coherence, not from fear. Try this quietly for a moment. Feel the weight of your body in the chair, the rhythm of your breath. Without naming or judging, notice the sensations as they are, the air on your skin, the faint hum of the room, the pulse behind your temples. For just a few seconds, allow everything to be exactly as it is. No fixing, no choosing, just seeing. In that pause, something invisible starts to shift. awareness steps forward and thought moves to the background. That's the doorway to real power, not through force but through presence. When you truly observe without interference, you begin to notice how effortlessly life organizes itself. The conversation you were anxious about unfolds naturally. The decision you couldn't make becomes clear in its own time. Even your emotions start to change texture. Anger, sadness, anxiety, they lose their sharpness when met by pure seeing. It's not that they vanish, they simply stop defining who you are. The observer doesn't deny the storm, it sees the storm and remains the sky behind it. And here lies the quiet miracle. Awareness itself has never been touched by your thoughts, your fears, or your history. You can't find it by improving your mind, because it's not of the mind. It's the open field in which the mind dances. You can spend years refining techniques, or you can simply notice the space in which every technique appears. That space is what you've been looking for. Most people miss it because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't sparkle or shout, it's not dramatic. The mind loves intensity, highs and lows, victories and failures, but awareness is subtler than any of that. It's like the silence between musical notes. It gives meaning to everything without needing attention for itself. You've probably glimpsed it before. Maybe while watching sunlight flicker through trees, or hearing a loved one laugh, or staring at the ocean until thought dissolved for a second. In those moments, you weren't doing observation. Observation was simply happening. That's the state where life feels simple, direct, unresisted. The great paradox is that you can't reach this power by searching for it, because the search itself belongs to the mind. The only action that leads there is the act of not acting, the surrender of interference. You don't have to find awareness, you only have to stop ignoring it. As this realization settles, a subtle humility grows. You begin to see that reality doesn't need your constant commentary to function. The heart beats, breath flows, planets move, all without your permission. When you rest in that understanding, your sense of control loosens. You start trusting the intelligence already woven into everything. And from that trust, a deeper kind of clarity emerges. One that doesn't shout for attention, but simply is. And it's from this still point, this space that sees without grasping, that the next illusion begins to unravel. The illusion that you are the thoughts themselves. Because once you've glimpsed the power in pure observation, you start to question the identity of the one who thinks. The next shift happens not in the mind's activity, but in what you recognize yourself to be when the thoughts keep speaking, and you remain perfectly still inside. There is a quiet moment, often unnoticed, when a simple thought turns into a self. It begins as a passing idea. I'm not good enough, I can't do this, they don't understand me. But within seconds it becomes me. You don't just think the thought. You become the one who suffers it. That instant of fusion, where awareness fuses with the image it sees, is the birthplace of illusion. That's identification, the act of mistaking the movement of the mind for the truth of who you are. The danger of identification is not that thoughts exist, it's that you believe they define you. You forget that they are temporary weather passing through the vast sky of consciousness. Instead, you shrink the entire sky down to a single cloud and call it my life. You say I am anxious instead of anxiety is passing through me. You say I am lost instead of confusion is being observed. The difference seems subtle, but it's the gap between imprisonment and freedom. Identification gives the mind its power. Without your belief, a thought is nothing, just a brief flicker in awareness. But when you cling to it, feed it, narrate it, it hardens into identity. I am this kind of person. I always fail at that. They always treat me like this. Each repetition strengthens the fiction until it feels real. You start to live not as a being, but as a story about a being. And the more you try to change the story, the more entangled you become in its language. Imagine holding a costume for too long. At first you know it's just fabric, a role for a moment. But if you never take it off, if you sleep and wake and eat inside it, you begin to forget there's someone underneath. Identification works like that. The mind's narratives are costumes: fear, pride, guilt, ambition, and they have their purpose. They help you navigate human experience. But when you forget their costumes, you lose access to the one who's actually wearing them. You can feel identification whenever your peace depends on conditions. When someone praises you, you expand. When they criticize, you contract. When life flows, you feel capable. When it resists, you feel broken. The self built on thought is fragile because it must constantly defend its borders. Every opinion becomes a threat, every failure an injury. That's not because reality is hostile, it's because identification makes you small enough to be wounded by everything. Try to notice this dynamic in something simple. The next time you feel irritation, at a delay, a noise, a message, pause for a moment. Instead of saying, "I'm irritated," watch irritation itself. Where does it appear? What does it feel like in your body? Does it have a shape, a texture, a pulse? For a few seconds, look without naming. What you'll find is that the irritation changes the moment you observe it. It loses solidity. You realize you are not the feeling. You are the one seeing it arise and fade. This shift from "I am this" to "I am aware of," this is not just philosophical, it's physiological. Identification tightens the body. Shoulders rise, breath shortens, muscles brace. Observation releases that contraction. Awareness softens the nervous system because it doesn't need to defend a fictional self. When you see clearly, you no longer fight with shadows. The energy that used to feed the false identity returns to presence, to vitality, to creativity. The mind, however, resists this exposure. It doesn't want to be seen as a construct. It will use clever disguises, spiritual ambition, moral superiority, victimhood, even humility, to keep itself intact. It whispers, "Yes, but this time it's different. This feeling is really me." That's the most seductive voice of all. The belief that your current story is the truth. But if you look carefully, you'll see that every story has changed over time. The one who thought it was worthless years ago is not the same one who now thinks it must prove its worth. Both are passing forms. What has remained the same through all those shifts is the silent awareness behind them, watching, waiting, unchanged. You can test this in real time. Think of a moment from your past, perhaps a memory that still stings. As you recall it, notice what happens. The mind revives the image, the emotion rises, and for a second, it feels like now. But who is the one noticing this playback? Who is aware of the image, the feeling, the tension in the body? That awareness is not inside the memory, it's the space in which the memory appears. You've never been the event, you've always been the seeing of it. This understanding doesn't make pain vanish, it transforms your relationship with it. You no longer say, "I am suffering," but suffering is being experienced. That small shift restores your true position, the observer, not the character. From that vantage, emotion can flow through you without residue. It completes its cycle and dissolves because it's no longer being held in the grip of identity. Identification is the root of separation. It's what makes the ocean believe it's a single wave fighting for survival. But when awareness remembers itself, the boundaries soften. The wave doesn't disappear. It continues to move, to express, to experience, but it knows its substance is water. The mind may still create stories, but now they're seen as temporary art, not ultimate truth. And that recognition, delicate yet profound, prepares the ground for a deeper shift. The realization that the mind's endless loops of thought and reaction are not just habits, but the machinery of identification itself. When you see that clearly, you begin to sense the next layer of illusion, how the mind invents both the problem and the solver. It keeps you busy with fixing what it created. To glimpse that cycle is to come close to freedom, and that is where the next unfolding begins. There's a peculiar exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix, the fatigue that comes from living inside the mind's endless loop. It's not physical tiredness, it's the depletion that follows constant inner effort, the invisible work of maintaining 1,000 unfinished thoughts. The mind invents the problem, tries to solve it, then questions its own solution, all while claiming it's making progress. You wake up inside this loop each morning and call it thinking about life, unaware that most of that thinking is just recycling what was never resolved yesterday. The loop begins innocently. Something triggers discomfort, a small mistake, a disagreement, a sense that something's missing. The mind immediately rushes in to analyze, categorize, predict. It promises relief through understanding. But the relief never arrives because the analysis itself feeds the discomfort. The mind can't let go of what it hasn't controlled, and it can't control what it refuses to see clearly. So it keeps spinning, mistaking movement for solution. Imagine standing in front of a mirror maze. Every turn shows another reflection of the same confusion. You keep walking, believing that one more step will lead to an exit. But each step only produces another image of the walker, you, multiplied by the hall of thoughts. That's how the loop sustains itself. Reflection, chasing, reflection. The more you seek resolution through thought, the more thought you generate to resolve. You can feel this cycle in your body. The moment a thought takes hold, tension begins, a tightening in the chest, a contraction in the breath. That's the mind converting mental restlessness into physical strain. Most people don't notice it because it has become their baseline. They call it being alert or staying sharp, but it's really resistance masquerading as awareness. The mind resists what is, hoping to think its way into a different state, yet that resistance itself is what drains the energy needed to simply be. You might observe how this plays out on an ordinary day. Something small happens, an unanswered message, a critical tone in someone's voice. The mind reacts instantly. Why didn't they respond? Did I do something wrong? Maybe they've changed their opinion of me. The body tenses. The story expands. Then, trying to ease the discomfort, you think even more, I should let it go, but why do I always care so much? The effort to stop the thought becomes another thought. It's like trying to smooth a wrinkle by pressing harder. The more pressure you apply, the deeper the crease. This is the self-perpetuating design of the mind. It creates both the itch and the scratching. And because each cycle produces a small dose of emotional intensity, frustration, anxiety, anticipation, the mind becomes addicted to its own motion. It confuses stimulation for aliveness. But real aliveness doesn't burn through you. It breathes through you. It's the quiet vitality that exists before the mind begins to comment. If you were to step back for just a moment and watch the loop in real time, something fascinating would happen. You'd see that the problem the mind is trying to solve often doesn't exist outside the mind. The body may be sitting safely, the room quiet, life unfolding without threat. And yet, inside, a storm of imagined possibilities rages. The body doesn't know they're imaginary, so it prepares as if they were real. Heart rate rises, cortisol spikes, muscles tighten. The mind tells the body there's danger. The body confirms it through tension, and the mind takes that as proof that danger is real. That feedback loop is what drains your energy day after day. You can break the loop, not by thinking your way out of it, but by seeing it as it happens. The next time you catch your mind spinning around a problem, pause and ask, what is actually happening right now? Look around, feel your feet, notice the air on your skin. Usually reality is calm. The turbulence exists only in the thought field. When you recognize this difference, something remarkable occurs. The loop begins to lose fuel. Observation steals the energy the loop depends on. Without your identification, it starts to collapse under its own weight. At first, this awareness may last only a second. The loop will pull you back in quickly with another thought. Yes, but this situation really matters. And again the story resumes, that's okay. Each moment of seeing, even brief, weakens the momentum. Over time, you start to notice that between one thought and the next, there's a small gap, a pause where nothing happens. In that pause, there is no problem, no identity, no exhaustion. There is only presence. The loop hates that gap because it can't survive in it. Thought requires time, past and future, but awareness exists only now. Each time you rest in that now, the machinery of overthinking grinds to a stop, even for a breath. And in that stillness, energy begins to return, not the restless energy of urgency, but a quiet strength that doesn't need to fix anything. It's almost shocking when you realize how much of your vitality has been lost to internal noise. The mind says it's trying to protect you, but in truth, It's keeping you in a constant state of subtle conflict. It's like revving an engine while parked, believing that you're getting somewhere. The fuel burns, the noise increases, but you remain exactly where you were. As awareness deepens, you begin to sense a different rhythm underneath the noise. A slow, steady pulse of existence that doesn't depend on thought to be real. You start to see that clarity doesn't come from solving the loop, but from stepping outside of it. When you stand in that quiet space of observation, the loop still moves, but it no longer owns your energy. And from that still vantage, another truth begins to reveal itself. The loop was never the real problem. It was the attachment to it. When attention withdraws from the drama of constant thought, the underlying stillness begins to shine through. And that stillness, the silent awareness that watches every rise and fall, is what the mind has been overlooking all along. It's there, waiting, beneath the noise of repetition, holding a power that doesn't exhaust but restores, the very power that begins to awaken when you stop fueling the loop and simply see it for what it is. There's a moment, delicate, almost imperceptible, when observation shifts from being a concept to a living experience. Until that moment, you've been trying to observe in the same way you try to achieve anything else, with effort, with a goal, with the hope that something will happen because of it. But true observation doesn't operate like that. It's not a technique, it's a return. When awareness turns inward and simply sees without trying to change what it sees, a quiet reordering begins. The game of control collapses, and something far more intelligent takes over. At first, the mind resists this new way of seeing. It's used to being the player, the one who strategizes, evaluates, and keeps score. When you start to watch it instead of playing along, it feels exposed, like a magician whose trick has just been revealed. It will fight for your attention, throwing thoughts like confetti. This isn't working. You're wasting time. You should be doing something productive. But if you stay still and keep observing even those thoughts, you'll notice something strange. They lose their power the moment you see them as thoughts. The observer doesn't argue or agree, it just sees. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean and watching the waves crash and recede. You don't try to stop them, and you don't label each one as good or bad. You simply let them rise, crest, and fall. That's what true observation feels like. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, all of them are waves in consciousness. The observer is the shore, steady, unshaken, quietly aware. When you stop wading into every wave and just watch them from the shore, you begin to realize something profound. The waves were never the problem. Drowning was. The simple act of watching changes everything because it dissolves identification. What you observe, you are not. The moment you see anger instead of being angry, anger loses its grip. The moment you notice anxiety rather than fighting it, the loop that once controlled you begins to unravel. This isn't passive detachment, it's active clarity. Observation doesn't suppress emotion, it liberates it from distortion. The feeling completes its natural course and dissolves on its own, like mist burning away under sunlight. You can test this with something as ordinary as irritation. Let's say someone interrupts you mid-sentence, and you feel the familiar surge of heat in the chest. Usually the mind takes over immediately. They don't respect me, they always do this. The story feeds the feeling and the feeling confirms the story. That's the loop. But if you pause, just for a breath, and observe, there is irritation here. Something subtle shifts. The heat in your chest is still there, but now it's being seen. The story loses oxygen. What remains is just raw energy moving through the body, no longer personal, no longer owned. Observation neutralizes the toxin of identification without any suppression. This is why the ancients spoke of witness consciousness as the seat of freedom. It's not an abstract philosophy, it's a functional mechanism of perception. When awareness looks without attachment, what it looks at transforms. Not because observation forces change, but because clarity is incompatible with distortion. Light doesn't need to argue with darkness. It just needs to shine. The mind finds this difficult to accept because it's addicted to effort. It believes that progress must come from doing. So even as you begin to observe, it tries to interfere. I'm observing really well right now. Am I doing it right? But that's just another thought to observe. The beauty of awareness is that even your attempts to be aware can be included in awareness. Nothing needs to be excluded or perfected. Everything, the confusion, the distractions, the impatience, can be seen, and in being seen it begins to soften. Over time, this kind of observation starts to rewire the nervous system. It's as if the body learns that not every internal signal requires reaction. The shoulders drop, the breath deepens, the mind quiets because it's no longer being fed with resistance. You start to notice how much energy was once spent on managing inner conflict. Energy that now returns as stillness. Observation restores that energy by ending unnecessary motion. There's also an unmistakable intelligence that begins to reveal itself. When you stop reacting, perception becomes cleaner. You start noticing subtleties, the tone of a conversation, the texture of your own thoughts, the silent intuitions that guide you effortlessly. Observation connects you with a deeper coherence that was always present beneath the surface noise. Decisions become simpler, not because you analyze better, but because clarity replaces confusion. The game changes because you're no longer a piece being moved by thoughts, emotions, and external conditions. You're the player who finally realizes the board is imaginary. The moves still happen, work, relationships, responsibilities, but they unfold from awareness rather than from compulsion. You can participate fully without losing yourself in the play. And paradoxically, when you no longer try to control outcomes, life starts aligning itself with precision that effort could never achieve. You might notice that situations that once drained you now flow more easily. People respond differently, not because they've changed, but because your inner frequency has shifted from reaction to presence. Observation reorganizes your relationship with reality, not through force, but through resonance. The world mirrors the state of the observer. When you see with clarity, clarity begins to echo back through everything you touch. The old game, the one driven by effort, resistance, and mental control, starts to fade into the background. It's not that it disappears, it just loses its authority. Awareness takes the steering wheel without struggle. From that space, you begin to sense something even deeper stirring underneath the act of observing itself. A quiet question forms at the edge of perception. If observation dissolves chaos so effortlessly, what exactly is this awareness made of? And that question, subtle yet powerful, leads directly toward the next unfolding. The realization that the presence doing the observing isn't something you use, it's what you've always been. There comes a moment, often quiet and unspectacular, when the search itself begins to dissolve. Not because you've found what you were looking for, but because you suddenly realize it was never missing. Everything the mind has been chasing, peace, clarity, control, enlightenment, has been quietly present beneath the noise of effort all along. The turning point is not a new discovery. It's the falling away of the assumption that something needed to be found. Up to now, you've been climbing an invisible ladder, trying to rise above confusion, overcome limitation, become more conscious. The climb gave you purpose. It made you feel as though each new technique, each insight, each experience was bringing you closer to something ultimate. But every step was made of the same material, the belief that the goal was elsewhere. What you didn't notice was that the ground you were standing on, the very awareness in which the climb was happening, was the destination. You've been moving inside what you were seeking. Think of sunlight entering a room through a small window. The dust in the air dances in the beam, glowing and swirling. The mind is like that dust, constantly moving, constantly illuminated by something it doesn't recognize. Awareness is the light. It doesn't need to move. It doesn't even need to understand what it's shining on. Everything that appears, thought, emotion, sensation, is visible only because that light is already present. When you turn your attention toward the light itself, instead of the movement it reveals, something shifts. You stop mistaking the shimmer of particles for the source of illumination. This is the moment when seeking begins to feel strange. You might notice that the more you look for awareness, the less you can find it as an object. It's not located anywhere, yet everything appears within it. It has no edge, no form, no beginning. The mind can't grasp it because it's the one being grasped. You can't step outside awareness to see it, just as an eye can't turn around to look at itself. And here lies the quiet shock. This has always been the case. Even in your most distracted moments, awareness was there, watching distraction. Even in your deepest pain, awareness was there, witnessing pain. Even in confusion, awareness was calmly noticing confusion. It never left, never weakened, never judged. You didn't need to awaken awareness. It was awareness that was dreaming you. You may begin to sense this in flashes. One morning, while brushing your teeth, you realize that your hand is moving. Your reflection is visible. Thoughts are murmuring in the background. And yet, none of it is you. There's simply seeing. The body, the thoughts, the sensations are happening in the same effortless way that wind moves through trees. And in that realization, something relaxes. The weight of trying to maintain a self begins to lift. It's not a mystical experience. It's extraordinarily ordinary. The extraordinary part is that you've overlooked it for so long. The mind was trained to look for dramatic proof, a vision, a revelation, a sudden flood of bliss. But the real turning point is quieter than silence. It's not fireworks, it's recognition. You realize that awareness doesn't arrive with fanfare because it never left. In that recognition, the machinery of striving loses momentum. The desire to become something better starts to feel unnecessary, even absurd. Not because growth ceases, but because you see that growth was never about acquiring something new. It was about remembering what was never lost. Every lesson, every challenge, every failure was a mirror reflecting the same simple truth. You were never outside of consciousness. You were consciousness pretending to look for itself. Try pausing for a few seconds now and simply notice your experience as it is. Sounds, sensations, thoughts, feelings, all appearing spontaneously. Then ask, what is aware of this? Don't try to answer. Just let the question rest like a pebble dropped into still water. Immediately, attention turns inward, not toward a thing, but toward the space in which everything arises. You can't define it, but you can sense its presence. That's not new. It's what's been quietly observing since the very first moment of your life, before any identity formed, before you learned the word I. This realization doesn't make you vanish or detach from the world. Paradoxically, it makes everything more vivid. The colors seem brighter, the sounds clearer, the emotions cleaner. Because now, instead of seeing life through the fog of effort and comparison, you see it through transparency. Awareness doesn't edit reality, it allows it. And in that allowance, energy that was once consumed by resistance returns as aliveness. This is the subtle but profound shift, from being the seeker to being the space in which seeking happens. The you that was trying so hard to awaken begins to dissolve like mist under sunlight, revealing the clarity that was always underneath. It's not annihilation, it's recognition. You haven't lost yourself, you've stopped mistaking the reflection for the face, and once that recognition stabilizes, something remarkable begins to happen. Silence. The same silence that once felt like emptiness starts to feel full, alive, intelligent. You begin to sense that awareness isn't just neutral observation, it has a natural order, a coherence that aligns everything without effort. Life starts moving with precision you could never orchestrate through thought. The power you were searching for begins to move through you, not because you've earned it, but because you finally stopped standing in its way. And as that quiet power reveals itself as your own nature, a new layer of realization begins to unfold. That silence itself is not absence. It's presence in its purest form, the gateway through which reality organizes itself when you no longer interfere. Silence has a reputation it doesn't deserve. Most people think of it as a blank space between moments, a passive absence of sound or movement. But true silence is not the absence of anything. It's the presence of everything in its most coherent form. It's not empty. It's alive, saturated with intelligence. When the mind stops interfering, silence doesn't just appear. It reveals that it was always there, patiently holding the chaos together. For much of your life, silence may have felt uncomfortable. The mind doesn't trust it. It fills every pause with commentary, every breath with analysis. To the mind, Silence feels like losing control, as if the entire machinery of thought would collapse without its constant noise. And in a way, it does. But that collapse isn't destruction, it's restoration. When the constant chatter finally softens, the underlying rhythm of life begins to pulse through again, and what once felt like emptiness turns out to be the source of vitality itself. Consider how water clears when it stops being stirred. The sediment falls away and suddenly the depth becomes visible. Silence works the same way. It doesn't fix or force clarity, it allows it. The mind, in its restless movement, clouds perception, but when it quiets, what's real starts to shine through naturally. This is why some of the most profound answers come not from effort but from quiet moments. The pause before sleep, the stillness after an emotional storm, the wordless awareness that follows deep observation. The mind calls it coincidence, but it's not. It's the intelligence of silence reorganizing what noise had scattered. You can sense this directly if you take a moment to stop speaking, stop moving, stop trying to reach any conclusion. Just listen, not to external sounds, but to the background behind them. That soft hum that doesn't change whether thoughts are loud or faint, that awareness that never wavers no matter what arises. That is the silence we're talking about. It isn't something you create through discipline. It's the natural state beneath all disturbance. What's fascinating is that silence doesn't reject sound. It holds every sound within it, the same way awareness holds every thought and emotion without judgment. Silence isn't opposed to noise. It's the space that makes noise possible. Without it, sound couldn't even exist. And without inner silence, thought loses coherence. The reason so much of human energy feels scattered is because the inner space has been forgotten. We live in mental noise the way fish live in murky water, unaware that clarity was an option. This silence has a quality that's deeply practical. It isn't detached or aloof, it's perfectly responsive. When you enter that still space, decisions become cleaner, not because you think less, but because you think only what's necessary. Action flows naturally, like a river finding its path without argument. Silence sharpens perception. It makes the difference between reacting impulsively and responding intelligently. In its presence, confusion untangles itself. There's a story, not as metaphor, but as demonstration, in every quiet breakthrough you've ever had. Remember the times when you were struggling with a problem, pushing for an answer, and then, exhausted, you gave up for a moment? You took a walk, stared at the ceiling, or sat in stillness, and suddenly the solution surfaced effortlessly. That wasn't coincidence. It was silence doing what the mind couldn't. When you stopped insisting, reality could finally rearrange itself. Silence also heals in ways the mind can't measure. The body listens to the mind's pace. When thought is frantic, breath tightens and the nervous system follows. But in silence, the rhythm of life resets. Breathing deepens, muscles unclench. Energy that was trapped in mental agitation begins to circulate again. This isn't mystical. It's physiology responding to awareness. The body recognizes truth faster than the mind does, and silence is its natural environment. Yet the irony is that people often seek silence as if it were a rare resource, something to visit during meditation or in nature. But silence isn't a place, it's a perception. You can hear the traffic outside, the hum of a refrigerator, the beating of your own heart, and still be resting in silence, because silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the absence of resistance. It's what remains when you stop fighting the moment. The supreme power of silence lies in its neutrality. It doesn't take sides. It doesn't prefer one outcome over another. It allows life to unfold without manipulation. That neutrality is not indifference, it's clarity. It's the recognition that reality doesn't need your constant correction to find balance. When you stop interrupting with your mental edits, life naturally arranges itself toward harmony. Silence isn't passive, it's the ultimate intelligence expressing itself through stillness. If you spend enough time in that inner quiet, you start to notice a subtle hum beneath all things, an unbroken continuity that was never disturbed, even when your mind was loud. This hum is the vibration of coherence itself. Every thought, every sound, Every movement arises and fades within it, but the hum remains. It's the tone of existence before the mind divides it into meaning. It's what mystics called the soundless sound, the silent resonance that unites all opposites. And this realization changes your relationship with manifestation, with creation itself. You start to see that silence doesn't only reveal what's true, it also generates what's real. In the stillness of non-interference, intention aligns effortlessly with the natural order. What you once tried to attract through force begins to unfold organically, without struggle, because silence isn't empty. It's creative potential in its purest form. It's the womb of reality. Everything emerges from it and returns to it. When you stop trying to manipulate the rhythm of life, you begin to move in tune with it. And that harmony, born from stillness, is what allows manifestation to shift from effort to effortless alignment. Manifestation has long been taught as a kind of mental craftsmanship, the art of using thoughts, emotions, and intention to sculpt reality into shape. The formulas are familiar. Visualize the outcome, align your vibration, believe it's already yours. But for many people, after years of practice, something still feels off. The desires remain at arm's length, and the same patterns of striving repeat. The reason is subtle yet profound. Manifestation, in the way it's usually understood, still comes from the mind, from the assumption that life must be managed, that the universe responds to command. The real creative force doesn't work that way. It doesn't move through control. It moves through coherence. Coherence begins when the observer stops interfering. You can think of it like tuning an instrument that's been played too aggressively. When the strings of intention and emotion are stretched by effort, they produce distortion. But when they're relaxed into balance, the sound becomes pure, resonant, aligned. That purity is what the universe recognizes, not the demand of the mind, but the frequency of clarity. You don't attract what you want, you reveal what's already compatible with your state of being. The traditional model of manifesting starts from lack. It begins with the sentence, "I want this because I don't have it." Every affirmation and visualization then tries to cover that emptiness. But awareness, when it's silent and still, operates from wholeness. It sees that nothing essential is missing. Life is already happening in abundance. From that understanding, desire stops being a cry for completion and becomes a quiet movement of expression. It's no longer, "I need this to feel whole," but rather, "This wants to unfold through me." Imagine a sculptor working not to prove mastery, but simply to let beauty emerge. The clay isn't an obstacle, it's an ally. That's the new paradigm. You're not trying to force reality to obey. You're cooperating with a field that's already intelligent. The key shift is from manipulation to participation. The universe isn't outside you waiting for instruction. It's inside you, mirroring your inner coherence. You can notice this directly when you drop into deep awareness. In the moments when your mind stops pushing, life begins to flow in surprising harmony. The phone call arrives at the right time. The conversation you were anxious about unfolds effortlessly. A solution appears where logic had failed. This isn't magic. It's the natural synchronization that occurs when inner resistance dissolves. The moment you stop arguing with reality, reality stops arguing back. To manifest from this level doesn't require intensity. It requires transparency. It means seeing through every subtle contraction that says, "I must control this." It's an act of surrender, not passivity, the surrender of distortion, so that clarity can act. When your inner world is coherent, creation happens not by force but by resonance. You don't make things happen. They unfold through you because there's no longer separation between observer and observed. There's a point where you begin to realize that every genuine manifestation has always arrived through stillness, not struggle. Think of the moments in your life when something you truly needed appeared unexpectedly, not through planning, but through alignment. Perhaps you were tired of worrying, and for a brief moment you let go. And in that letting go, life moved. That's the hidden principle. The universe responds to openness, not pressure. The tighter the grip, the less flow there is. Silence, then, becomes the most powerful manifesting field. Not a silence that denies the world, but one that listens so deeply it becomes the world. When you rest in that silence, intention is no longer a thought. It's a vibration of awareness itself. It doesn't come from the head. It comes from the whole field of being. You sense what wants to happen next, and by allowing it, you give reality permission to express it through you. In that state, even desire transforms. It becomes lighter, cleaner, free of grasping. You may still prefer one outcome over another, but there's no fear attached to it. You no longer need to wrestle with timing or method because you trust the intelligence moving behind the scenes. Manifestation becomes a dialogue rather than a demand, a dance between your inner frequency and the larger pattern of existence. This shift is subtle but revolutionary. It means you no longer spend your energy trying to make life cooperate. You recognize that life is cooperation, an ongoing exchange between consciousness and form. Every thought, every emotion, every act of noticing shapes the field. But only when you are aware of that field, without tension, does the shaping become precise. The new way to manifest is less about constructing and more about remembering. Remembering that the same intelligence that turns acorns into oaks and embryos into humans is moving through you right now. You don't need to teach it how to create. You only need to stop interfering long enough to let it express itself. When awareness becomes transparent, when the noise of self-concern quiets, manifestation becomes effortless, because creation and consciousness are revealed to be one and the same. And as this realization deepens, a new rhythm begins to emerge in daily life. You act but without struggle. You intend but without grasping. You choose but without fear of loss. Life starts responding not to what you think, but to what you are. This is manifestation through being, not through mental design, but through resonance with what's already true. And it's here, in this spacious cooperation between self and source, that the deeper power of observation reveals its final secret, that everything you were trying to manifest was never separate from you to begin with, and the one who observes, silently and clearly, was the creator all along. Everything you've been seeking, and clarity, peace, power, was never hiding in the distance. It's been watching through your eyes all along, quietly waiting for recognition. The shift was never about becoming more, but about seeing clearly. When you observe without trying to fix, when you rest in the silence that allows everything to be, life begins to move with effortless precision. The universe no longer feels separate, it breathes through you. If you've reached this point, take a breath and write the word aware in the comments below. It's your signal that you didn't just watch, you saw. And if this message resonated, choose one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. Keep walking deeper into this field of observation and quiet power. Each step isn't a search, it's a remembering of what's always been here.